This is a recording from a workshop held in London on the 8th of April 2013 by HANDI, the Health Apps Network for Development and Innovation. The focus of the workshop was the NHS Interoperability Toolkit and how it can help health apps developers work effectively and play nicely with NHS data. This presentation was given by George Hope from the NHS ITK team, which is now located within the newly formed Health and Social Care Information Centre. George describes the facilities provided by the ITK, the growing support for developers available through the development network, and future plans for the ITK.
Right, hello one and all, my name's George Hope. As said, I work with the Health and Social Care Information Centre now. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to give you an overview of the reference implementation that we've built. Before I go any further, what I want to say is, there's two guys in this room who've been absolutely fundamental in the development of it all. That's Mike Hodlingsmith and Nick Jones. They came to CFH middle of last year. One of the first things they said was the learning plan that you had, which was lots of documents. It's got to be made easier. They took an initiative themselves, largely, to say, what can we do on behalf of the developer community to make this life easier? So, you know, I want that to be recognised, that Mike and Nick are sort of prime movers in all this. There's been a lot of work done recently around the ITK and a thing called the Developer Network. So I'm going to overview the Developer Network first, then we'll look at the purpose of the reference implementation for the ITK, do a bit of a demo based on scenarios, look at a couple of synchronous and asynchronous examples, and then we're looking for any suggestions for improvement. And then I'll give you sort of a bit of insight into our next steps. The Developer Network is an NHS England sponsored site. If you log on to the site, which you can find under Google, etc., you'll see something like that. You'll also sort of see access to a signing in page. It's community focused with forums for discussion. You can join with your Open ID, so you can use your Google passwords and stuff like that. From an ITK perspective, we're going to be adding more content, I say soon. Problem is with Nick and Mike leaving us, that's left us in a gap in resources, but once we've got the resources back up to speed, there'll be increasingly more content for the ITK coming into the Developer Network. We regard it as the portal. The Developer Network is the portal entry for the interoperability framework information. The Developer Network is bigger than ITK. ITK is one component of the Developer Network. From an ITK perspective, again, we're going to use the RSS alerts for implementation notes. One of the things we've found is that the specifications, our turnaround time is not quick. And we learn things, and we need to get to the community quicker to say, if you come for accreditation, we will be changing something because we've learnt something. Header signing was a recent one where we had to send out notes via TRUD, which isn't exactly user-friendly. Going forward, we'll still put them out on TRUD for those that use TRUD, but the Developer Network for those that are signed on will be the point of communication for all the up-to-minute information about the ITK. So if you're not signed on to the Developer Network and part of the ITK community, you won't be getting these RSS feeds and notifications. So I advise anybody who is interested in the ITK to do that. As part of the reference implementation, we made sure it's a reference implementation. It is not fully comprehensive of all the requirements that are in the specs. It's covering the most sort of common areas that we meet up against. And at the bottom is the URL. What you'll also find there, we're going to put all the testing tools that some of you may know Damien Murphy, and increasingly, you know, we'll be putting all the stuff that Damien does accessible from the Developer Network. And a little bit of note on, we've got a couple of VMs running in a cloud space somewhere. So, the purpose of the reference implementation as we've heard already. Feedback is specific. The specification is not user-friendly. The specs are verbose with related requirements sprinkled across a number of documents. So to add up the net sum of what you've got to do takes a bit of time. What I would say is that once people have gone through that hurdle of paper, what you find is actually people say they're not that complex, i.e. you've created more verbose information than is needed. Actually it's not that complex. The other thing that we want to do is we don't want to issue specs and not realise where the strengths and weaknesses are. So what we want to do is be able to road test our own specs. And again, it was a strong feedback from Nick and Mike that was that who's proven this stuff? Who's shown how it works? You know, we need to demonstrate this so that we aren't asking people to do things that are difficult or unnecessary. We need to be able to assess the impact of future change. By having the reference implementation, we can say we want to change the specs this way and quickly understand the impact on our specs. It makes it much, much easier in-house to be able to assess some of the things that we're going to change sort of shortly. And I'll come on to those bits in a little bit of time. The other thing is it's a resource that's really for the developer community. You know, people who are coders will find this stuff the most useful. Architects will find it useful, coders will find it useful. People wanting to understand an overview and conceptually how the ITK fits together will find it useful. It is not everything to all people, but it's targeted at those people that are trying to develop code and those people that are working with them. The area that I work in, I'm an architect. I don't concern myself with payload. I try and dissociate myself from payload matters. Not meaning they're not important, meaning that they are somebody else's concern. What I try and do is get whatever that payload is there and back again in a secure way and make sure it's clinically safe. So I'm not really concerned whether I'm passing details about, you know, any clinical content. It doesn't matter to me. What we're trying to do is create a living reference. So as I say, as the reference material gets up-versioned, etc., we will up-version the reference implementation to reflect the new things that we've done. And what we're trying to do is make it easy to use, intuitive, and the big thing is online, because the TRUD materials currently, you've got to download them and install them, and you've got to know the HTML and stuff like that. It's really good if you're travelling on a train, but it's actually not very good for keeping things current and up to date, you know, 24/7, and being able to share it across the company very easily. You know, log on to this site. All the benefits of having a URL access. So what does it consist of? The key thing I would say is the reference implementation. It shows how it can be done. We have some sample messages. One of the great pieces of feedback we've had is just being able to see the messages that you send are really useful. You know, we've got a distribution envelope, we've got a SOAP envelope, we've got a CDA document. How does that all bundle and what does it look like? So one of the strong messages we've had back from the people that we showed it has been just being able to see the messages has been a really useful thing. We've got samples, we've got the API, and we've got a reference mini site, so you can download some of this stuff as well for your own use. It's all Java based at the moment. We are looking at, you know, resources willing, the ability to support the .NET world as well, because they're the two major sort of development communities that are out there. Potential uses: accreditation support. So if Dr. were coming through, we'd point them at this site alongside the specs and say, look, if you're going to build some stuff, it looks like this. So you can see just from that list, really. I'm not going to forever read all the slides, but we will use it to show how we would use new content. We've been doing some work on cryptography, for example, and when that's ready for release, that'll come out showing how it can be done as part of the reference implementation. Some design principles of the RI: trying to make it easy, aligned to the application actor role, hide and align transport complexity, so you can reuse the code that you see, and if you wanted to change transport, it shouldn't be, lots of that code is reusable, not transport dependent. Should be easy to extend and integrate with other APIs, for example CDA API, stuff like that, or any others that we come up with. It was also done in such a way that the addressing is consistent with all message patterns and could effectively extend the scope of the ITK for API endpoint resolution, profile management, audit. What that last bullet point really says is we've parameterised it such that if there are services in the cloud, like a DOS, like an audit, like security, you could think about doing it this way. Imagine those services are available to you and you call those services. Some of the design decisions, I won't go through those. So, just to make sure you use best use of time, what I'll do is I'll go into the RI now, if I can do it. Internet access. Can somebody give me internet access? So if you come to the developer network, obviously I'd see if I can get the screen resolution a bit better. You'll find that you need to go to the library section, guess, interoperability and integration, guess, the interoperability framework. And the reason that is because obviously the developer network has more content than what I'm trying to show you here, so there are other things that are around here. Now what I want to do is really start off with, where I would start, I suppose, which is looking at the common real world scenarios. And what we've got here, for example, is a simple little picture that has a synchronous scenario with some scenarios here for that. A simple asynchronous with again some scenarios there. What the ITK currently call a routed message. This looks a bit more complex, but when you think about it, it's a sender, receiver, and a router in the middle. It's not rocket science really. So let's just have a little peek at the Spine Mini Services client. So you can see here that what we've got is that scenario. We've got a tabbed approach to looking at the client view, the SMS provider view, the request and the response messages. So now the problem I've got here is that until we click it to full screen, it's quite difficult to read, as it were, and obviously it's difficult because we're on this big screen at the moment. Now then. But what we've got is the full scenario of what's happening. If you want to look at a request, you can see the key components of the request. If you want a sample message, you can see a sample message. Now I think, for me, I'm not particularly a coder, but I can read code. It brought the ITK alive for me, and it certainly helped in some discussions I've been having with people recently to say, have a look at this, follow these links. You can see the roles and responsibilities of the various parties, and you can see a sample message. So you can see you can see the SOAP header, you can see the SOAP action that we've got. That we say send to the addressing where the distribution envelope starts down here, and the component parts of the distribution envelope, which I think for the first time brings it alive, for a lot of people. Instead of looking at a PDF document, looking at page 3, then page 18, then page 4, then page a different document, etc. so I'm just trying to sort of be real and sort of say, changing it from Word documents. What I would ask is, if this would have been available when you were starting off, what would your thoughts have been?
So something I didn't mention is some of the sample messages were really helpful. It did exist. It's in all the subdirectories, multi contrib, additional tools, sample messages. We found them in the end. It was very useful, but having this kind of thing would be awesome to sort of introduce you to it.
Yeah. then we can take you through the walkthrough and things like that. So, well, I don't want to go through every single scenario, but you can see that there are the most common scenarios, taking the sender's perspective, the provider's perspective, the request view, the response view, each with sample messages. It's quite a useful tool, I think, for those of you that have maybe met the IT kit, but you probably wish you'd brought it about last year for some of you.
Yes.
But, yeah. So, but anyway, it's here now for the next set of people. Now what I want to do now is, in case I'm navigating this properly, I went and had a quick look at the scenarios. And the beauty of having it online is, you know, it's all there to see forever. So having a quick look at the reference implementation, some of the stuff that you've seen on the slides about the design implementations, the samples project, the requirements for downloading and running, and deployments in the app server. It's all self-contained. Mike and Nick did a great job in making sure that you didn't need a particular Tomcat server out like that. You can just download this material. It'll all, if you like, load and unwrap itself for use. And where are we? We have a number of examples, so you can test out getting an HS number. Just populate it. It tells you the mandatory fields. So give it in.
It's not typing, George.
Is it not? Sorry. Thank you, mate. 68. Too far. In the middle. Yep. So it's got an NHS number response. So it's taking you through that you can, and obviously all it's doing is it's working internally. It's not going off anywhere. It's not going off onto the internet anywhere. It's routing locally to the local host to get results. Some that have been posted, some that have been saved as part of the reference implementation. But you can see how it's all going to operate, basically. Got a full set of the API in Java to see. So for those of you that are interested in looking at the classes and how they're made up, etc., all that's here. And finally, and this is not complete, what we have is we have the requirements that are written in the specs, like WSPAT 01, and we can link into the code to see how that requirement's been achieved. So quite useful to say that there is a requirement, and actually this is the area in the code that shows how that requirement is met. Obviously requirements cross-relate, etc., hence there are a number of points of entry to see how those requirements are met. Again, that's not fully comprehensive due to the extensive nature of the ITK, particularly around the use of routers and middleware and stuff like that. So I don't really want to go any further than that, other than to say it's there, it's online, it's going to be available. What I will ask actually is there anything else that you think I need to pull out, Mike and Nick? Is there anything you would want me to say?
I mean, this bit here linking from the requirements into the code base. I guess the only other thing, I mean, we saw it there, actually, as well as the code base being made publicly available, there is, without having to download anything, all of the code base is available as a set of hyperlinked HTML files, so that you can, one of the other links off there, so if you just wanted to browse the code base, you don't need to install it.
Thank you. So finally, what I'm going to try and do is, I'm going to go back to the presentation and say some general feedback, guys. Are you happy with that? Are you pleased we've done it? Do you want to see more of it? Help? Shout? Speak? Anybody?
Well,
question.
Yeah.
Are you gonna is it in your plans to make a REST API?
It's certainly under discussion. To be honest with you, if I was to guide you to what we're thinking of looking at, it's fire, which is part of the HL7 stuff. Because the problem we've got is we need to move with the industry. We can't move independently with the industry, and the industry isn't moving very quickly, if you like. So what we've got to do is we've got to make sure that they take the first step, and we sort of try and latch to that and extend that maybe for the UK, or for England, I should say now. I will sort of do one little bit more. Sorry, is there any more questions? I just see this man standing up, so.
No, you've plenty of time.
Oh, sure, okay.
Just making sure they behave.
Okay.
I've got a question. We're developing an electronic patient record for use in hospital.
Yeah.
And we would love to be able to access the PDS with an NHS hospital number to get the updated demographics for the patient. And prior to seeing your talk and just looking at the links you suggested on the website right now, our impression was that was a very complicated thing to do. The accreditation process would take too long and be too expensive.
Right.
But actually, it looks very, very simple. So are there sort of hidden things in the background that would stop us doing that?
A word of caution, I suppose. Yeah, when you use the ITK mechanisms to access spine, obviously from a spine perspective, it generally expects smart card access in the front of that. Right. So there is currently one spine mini service, which is with the PDS lookups, the search in the trace, what have you. That is only half the story, because however I phrase it, the bit that's mini services then meets the box, which becomes part of accessing the spine properly. So I speak to this device and I say I need access to the spine, and this device is the thing that talks to the spine. That falls under the CAP process. This bit falls under the ITK accreditation, which is skinny, light and easy. This bit is not so easy. So the request for service is easy to accredit. The getting the service is not so easy to accredit. It requires the CAP process currently. So I've misled you slightly thinking getting access to the spine is going to be easy. Getting access to the thing that calls the spine will be quick. From there to the spine and back again. Mike, go on, mate. Yeah, Nick, go on.
Yeah, I mean, SMSP isn't under full CAP. It is a slightly cut down CAP process designed to make it easier, but it's still been quite heavy, well, quite long to go through so far. But the intention is to make it as simple as possible. It is definitely less than full CAP.
Yeah.
So the message is there is the hope that the whole process could be simpler than we previously understood. Or is that?
Yeah, the SMSP process shouldn't be that difficult in actual fact.
Yeah.
But it has proven quite slow for various reasons.
The truth of the matter is, the ITK bit currently is easy, relatively. The bit that from ITK, which is from here to the spine, that's out of my control. That's in my control. That's out of my control. But I'm working with these guys to say, I've got the easy bit. Why are you making it hard?
Well, it's a very good question.
Yeah, and I'm doing the challenge internally for you. But I haven't got an answer today to say, and by June I'll have it finished. I'm going to say it's on my list of things to sort out.
It's one of the key things. I mean, I think you'll see from the sort of really useful presentation we've had from George and the comments from his colleagues that there's real willingness in part of the organisation to try and open this up.
Definitely.
And I think the encouraging thing that's also present at the very top of the organisation. I think there are some people who probably need a bit of re-education in some parts of the organisation.
Really?
And HANDI are working on that, and this meeting is part of that process.
Yes.
NHS senior people and government in general are really enthusiastic about engaging this community to deliver useful digital health tools. I mean, you're in a strong position within a significant NHS organisation to cut your way through this. It's even more challenging if you're an independent app developer. So we're keen to get that feedback, and we'll be continuing to lobby to say these guys have done a really great job. This is an example of how you should take it forward. You know, give them more support, and let's identify where the barriers are. And you know, we have peasants with flaming torches available to burn them down.
Certainly very happy to help in that process if you need some help. And the NHS organisation I represent, very happy to commit their resources to holding some flames.
But there were lots of green shoots in terms of the work that has been done by lots of parts of the organisation, and indeed in terms of the work with Intellect that's been going on around future architectures and the Spine 2 and NHS net procurement, which I hope will remove some of these barriers, which have made a lot of this stuff. I mean, even if you're a very large organisation, it's a deeply frustrating and expensive process going through CAP.
Yeah, it is.
For a small micro-enterprise SME, it becomes near impossible. This sort of approach starts to open that up, and we're really keen to promote that.
The key, I mean, I'm reasonably new to the role, sort of started roughly in sort of full-time July last year, working with Nick and Mike, and one of our key drivers was to open up the closed shop approach to CFIT. Hence I'm here today, hence we've done the reference implementation, hence we're saying we're going to change the specs this year. So during 2013 we are going to refresh the specs based on what we've learned. We do have now a monthly vendors meeting for those that have got accredited products, so that people can feed back and say, I don't like your specs, I'd like to see them a bit like this. Where's your REST information? Where are you going with mobile? What's going, to challenge us and to make us move forward. We're trying to be much more open than we've been probably in the past, and that's down to Nick and Mike and myself to say, we're not, we're the guys that sort of do this stuff, but we need the community's support to give us the feedback of how they want to see that change, because these are specs written for the community. I'll finish off very, very quickly on some of the lessons learned in this sort of since July last year. The key lessons that the three of us learned: improve the documentation, get it online. TRUD is not a fantastic resource to getting it to the documentation. Indeed. Separate educational concept from normative requirements. We put too much into the documents. What we will find is much more of we're going to leave the requirements quotes in TRUD, solid and based in TRUD. They will also appear in the reference implementation, but they will be surrounded by better resources to complement it, as in being online, using HTML, searchability and stuff like that. We're also looking to separate content by audience, because we realise the assets we've got currently are one size fit all, and that's not good enough. Keep design guidelines internal. A literal significant change that we're going to make this year is what's called the acknowledgement framework. And you get an infrastructure act whether you want one or you don't, or you request one, or if it's a CDA you get one, blah blah blah. We're taking that out and making that a configurable requirement in the distribution envelope to say, if you want these acts back, you populate these elements or attributes in the distribution envelope and you will then get them. If you don't populate them, you won't get them. So it becomes much more how it should be, based on configuration of the distribution envelope, rather than implicit in some words that infrastructure acts fly backwards and forwards by nature of it being a routed message, and a CDA routed message at that. It shouldn't be entwined like that. It should be configure the DE and you'll get a one. Stuff like that. We're going to remove the architectural consistencies, and a big thing we've got to think about is 1.1 to 1.2. So again, we'll be looking to the community to say, don't move, George, because the bindings and the encodings and the namespaces are quite different, or are different as I understand it. So with that, guys, thank you for the 20 minutes.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
If anybody has any immediate questions, please feel free, but we will pick up more in the discussion at the end as well.
Sorry, speaking from a doctor's point of view, I feel like a medical student just arrived at medical school. A mass of names, which is the thing I mentioned. Is there some one place where I can find, as a clinician, what all these tiny words, ICK and COAP and so on?
Yes,
Google's really good, Rupert. Google's really good.
I can't go. Yeah, but
also
I mean,
some of them,
I think there are
in answer to your question,
43 different initials. I mean, I don't know.
No.
How did you find them? Did you understand most of them or any of them?
I understand the technical terms, like SOAP and things like that, but the NHS specific ones for this project, it would be nice to be able to.
There are all sorts of issues.
But it'd be nice to have somewhere I can find an overview.
I think the interesting question is asked: what as a clinician do you need to understand?
Yes.
Because you probably don't need to know what SOAP stands for. Us, and it stands for Subjective Objective Assessment and Plan. which is not what most of the technical people in here thinks it stands for.
Even
and so we have acronym overload. So there are sites that give you lists of these acronyms. But I think it's important. It's important that the various elements of the community, the clinicians and the developers, understand each other.
Presumably it's not too difficult, just have a little drop down, you go over it and it will say interoperability framework.
I'm sure that could be done.
Context specific.
But I think also, you know, when you're dealing with stuff with a primary target audience, if you're going to do it, if you do as you plan, you're going to separate the business, which is where the clinical sits, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
From the others. You need to target it at your audience.
Yeah,
You know, you don't need the developer section to be accessible to the clinician unless they're like some of the people in this audience who are developer clinicians or clinician developers.
What I would say is, it's like you being a clinician, you would use abbreviations.
Oh yeah,
and I'm not. Let me finish.
Yeah.
So there are lots of abbreviations. We do have a website that contains a document that has them all in. It's about that thing itself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's full and it's riven. The CFH in NHS is riven with 3-letter acronyms and 4-letter acronyms for the techie stuff. CAP, SMSP. And what I'm saying is, there are resources on our website. If you want to find them. But what I would say is, when you get to them, you think, bloody hell, that's not
even
helpful.
for myself, who's been in this chasm between the world of IT and the world of medicine for 50 years, I'm still struggling to cope with even the little bits that a clinician needs to understand. CCIOs is moving in the right direction, and we're getting more people, hopefully, that are clinicians who do understand a bit more about what's going on behind the black box.
And organisations like this can help you build those bridges. And you know, acronyms are a great fun area. There are plenty of examples, which SOAP is one, which mean quite different things to clinical and IT communities. And I've been to some quite interesting meetings where it was, you know, well into the hour before they realised they were talking about different things.